A boy stands in a dry valley, holding nothing but a leather sling and 5 smooth stones he pulled from a stream bed a few minutes ago. In front of him is 9 feet of bronze and muscle and contempt. A soldier who has killed more men than the boy has years on this earth. Behind the boy, an entire army of grown men is frozen, watching, certain they already know how this ends. They're about to be wrong about almost everything, not just about who wins, about what this fight was ever really about. You know this story, or you think you do. You learned it as a children's tale. The little guy beats the big guy, so don't give up on your dreams. That is what we did to it. We shrank it down until it fit on a felt board in a Sunday school room. But this is not a story about size. This is not a story about an underdog. This is not a story about luck or a lucky shot. This is a story about a teenager who understood something that a king, an army, and a giant all miss. And it is the same thing most people still miss when they read it today. Watch the boy's hand. 5 stones. He only needs 1. Hold on to that detail, because by the end of this, those 4 extra stones are going to tell you who David really was. Let me take you back to the valley before anyone had ever heard the name David. There is a place in the hill country of ancient Israel called the Valley of Elah. Picture 2 ridges facing each other across a wide, dry riverbed. On one ridge stands the army of Israel. On the other ridge stands the army of the Philistines, a sea people, ironworking, organized, and, at this moment, winning. Between them, the valley floor. Nobody wants to go down first. Whoever charges down into that valley gives the enemy the high ground on the other side. So the 2 armies just sit there, staring across the gap, waiting, and then, every morning, something comes down out of the Philistine line that makes the men of Israel physically sick with fear. His name is Goliath, and he is from a city called Gath. The Hebrew text gives him a strange title, Ish Habanayim. It means the man of the between, the man who stands in the gap between 2 armies, because that is what he is here to do. He walks out into the middle of the valley alone, and he shouts the same thing every single morning for 40 days. He is not asking for a war. He is asking for one man. This is something we have lost, and it makes the whole story confusing if you don't know it. In the ancient world, there was a custom called representative combat. Instead of 2 whole armies grinding each other into the dirt, each side would send 1 champion. The 2 champions fought. Whoever won, won for everyone. The losing side became the servants of the winners. We have records of this from Egypt and from the Hittites. It was a real and recognized way to settle a war. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing about this very event a few decades after Jesus, describes the duel as exactly this kind of formal challenge. So when Goliath comes out, he is not just insulting people, he is making a legal military proposal. Send me a man. Let us settle this. And here is the detail that should stop you cold. Israel has the perfect man for the job. His name is Saul. He is the king. And the Bible has gone out of its way, chapters earlier, to tell you one specific thing about Saul's body. He stood head and shoulders taller than anyone else in the entire nation. There is one man in Israel built to answer a giant. He is wearing the crown. And for 40 days, he stays in his tent. Read that again. The tallest man in Israel is hiding from the tall man across the valley. That is where things stand when a teenager shows up carrying lunch. David is the youngest of 8 brothers. 8. In that culture, being the 8th son is a kind of invisibility. The important sons inherit. The youngest keeps the sheep. And that is exactly what David has been doing, out on the hills alone with the animals, while his 3 oldest brothers went off to join Saul's army and do something that mattered. His father, Jesse, doesn't send David to fight. Let that land. David's own father looks at him and sees a delivery boy. He loads him up with bread and a wheel of cheese for the commanding officer and tells him to go check on his brothers and bring back word that they're still alive. That's the assignment. Carry the cheese. Check on the men. Come home. So David walks into the army camp at the exact moment the morning challenge goes out. He hears the giant. He watches the most powerful army he has ever seen flinch backward like a single frightened animal. And he starts asking questions, not how do we run? He asks essentially, who does this man think he is? And the first person to put David in his place is not the giant. It is his own brother. Eliab, the oldest, hears David asking around, and something in him snaps. He turns on his little brother in front of the other soldiers and says with real venom, "Why did you come down here? Who's watching those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride. I know the evil in your heart." It is a cruel thing to say, and it is also a window. Eliab is terrified and ashamed, and here is the kid brother who isn't. Sometimes the people closest to you cannot stand it when you are not afraid of the thing that has them paralyzed. David lets it go, and then he does the thing that changes history. He goes to the king. Quick word before we go on. If a slow, careful walk back through the original story, the kind that takes the felt board version and shows you what was actually there, is something you want more of, the best thing you can do is subscribe and leave a comment. That is genuinely what tells the platform to put these in front of other people who are tired of the shrunk down version. And if you're already here doing that, thank you. You make this possible. Now, back to the valley. When David stands in front of Saul and volunteers, the king looks at him and says the obvious thing. You're a boy. He's been a soldier since he was a boy. You can't do this. And David answers with a resume nobody knew he had. He tells Saul that out in those lonely hills, keeping those few sheep Eliab sneered at, a lion came and took a lamb from the flock. And David went after it. He grabbed the lion by its beard, struck it, and killed it. And when a bear came, he did it again. He says it plainly, like a man reporting his work. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. Here is what you have to understand. Nobody saw that. There was no audience on those hills, no army to impress, no king to volunteer in front of. There was just a boy, some sheep that weren't even his, and a predator in the dark. And David fought anyway. He had already become, in private, the kind of man this moment required, long before there was a moment. You see the thread starting to form? Then David says the sentence that reframes the entire war. He looks at Saul and says, this giant will be like the lion and the bear because he has defied the armies of the living God. Catch what just happened. Every other man in that valley is asking, can we beat him? David is asking a completely different question. He is asking, who is this man to insult God? For everyone else, the giant is the problem. For David, the giant is just a loud mouth standing between him and the honor of the one he actually serves. Saul, desperate, agrees. And then he does something that almost ruins everything. He tries to make David into a smaller version of himself. He puts his own armor on the boy, the king's bronze helmet, the king's coat of mail, the king's sword. Picture it, a teenager swallowed up in a giant king's battle gear, the helmet sliding down over his eyes, the sword too heavy to lift. And David stands there for a second, clanking, and then he says 4 words that every single one of us needs to hear. I cannot walk in these. I have not tested them. And he takes it all off. This is the quiet hinge of the whole story, and we skip right past it. David almost went into the most important fight of his life dressed as someone else, in armor that had never worked for him, that had in fact never worked for Saul either, since Saul was wearing it in his tent the whole time. And David had the wisdom to stop in front of the king, in front of the army, and admit it does not fit. I cannot win as you. I can only win as me. So he takes off the armor. He picks up his staff. He walks down to the stream bed in the bottom of the valley, and he kneels, and he chooses 5 smooth stones, and he drops them in his shepherd's bag, and he walks out to meet the giant with a sling, the same tool he used to drive predators off his flock, looking to everyone watching like a child who has wandered onto a battlefield. Now, we are at the moment everyone knows, and I want you to see it as if you have never heard it. The giant looks down and is insulted. They have sent him a boy with a stick. He curses David by his gods. He says, "Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds." And David, this is the part that should give you chills. David answers him out loud across the valley for the whole army to hear. "You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hand, and all the earth will know that there is a God in Israel, for the battle is the Lord's." The battle is the Lord's. Say that out loud. That is the whole story in 4 words. David did not see this as his fight. He saw himself as a weapon in someone else's hand. And a man who believes the battle belongs to God does not need to be brave. He just needs to not run. Then it happens fast. The Bible is almost casual about it. The giant lumbers forward, and David runs toward him. He does not wait. He does not flinch. He runs at 9 feet of armed death, reaches into his bag, takes out 1 stone, fits it to the sling, and lets it fly. The stone catches Goliath in the forehead, in the one patch of skin the armor left open, and the giant, the man of the between, the terror of 40 mornings, falls face down into the dirt of the valley he owned. 1 stone, which brings us back to the 4 that were still in the bag. Why 5, if he only needed 1? People have answered that 100 ways, but here is the simplest and the truest. David did not know it would only take 1. He prepared like a man who might have to throw 5 times or 50, and he ran in anyway. That is the difference between recklessness and faith. He was not certain of the outcome. He was certain of who the outcome belonged to. The 5 stones are not a backup plan. They are honesty. They are a man saying, "I don't know how long this takes, but I am not leaving this valley." And now you can see the thread that was underneath the whole story. David won before he ever picked up a stone, because he was the only man on that field who was not fighting for himself. Saul was fighting for his crown, so he hid. Eliab was fighting for his pride, so he lashed out. Goliath was fighting for his own name, so he boasted. The whole army was fighting for its own survival, so it froze. And 1 shepherd boy walked down into the valley fighting for a name that was not his own. And that is the only reason he was free enough to win. Look at what they each walked away with. Saul wanted to protect his throne, and he lost it to this very boy within a few years. Goliath wanted to make a name for himself, and his name survived 3,000 years as a synonym for everything that falls. Eliab wanted to be the son who mattered, and we only remember him as the brother who sneered. And David did not want a throne or a name or a legend. He wanted the honor of the God he met alone on the hills, and he got all the rest thrown in. You have a valley. You know you do. There is something standing in the gap of your life, shouting the same thing every morning, and it has you doing what Israel did, sitting on the ridge, sick with it, waiting for someone braver to go down first. And I want to tell you the truest thing I know about that giant. The moment you stop trying to beat it in borrowed armor, in someone else's life, someone else's calling, the version of you that was never going to fit, and you pick up the one ordinary thing that has always been in your hand, the fight changes. Not because the giant got smaller, because you finally stopped fighting for yourself. So here is what I want you to take out of this valley. First, the real story. David and Goliath was never an underdog tale. It was a story about representative combat, one man standing in for everyone. And the boy understood that the man he truly stood for was God, which is the only reason he wasn't afraid. Second, what it means for you. You will be handed someone else's armor for almost every hard thing in your life. Someone else's method, someone else's idea of who you should be. And the bravest thing you can do is what David did in front of the whole army. Take it off and admit I cannot win as anyone but myself. And third, the thing underneath all of it, the reason David could run at a giant is that he had already decided the battle was not his to win or lose. It belonged to someone else. He was just the stone in the sling. And there is a strange, total freedom in that. The freedom of a person who no longer has to be strong enough because the outcome was never resting on them. So let me leave you with the question David answered without ever saying it out loud. Not, is your giant beatable? The real question is, whose battle is it? Because the day you can honestly say it isn't yours, you stop needing to win. And that's the exact moment you become impossible to scare. If this changed how you see the boy with the sling, subscribe. It's how these reach the next person. Leave a comment, even one word. Tell me what your valley is right now, the thing shouting at you every morning. And share this with someone who is sitting on the ridge, frozen, waiting to feel brave enough. And may the God who met a forgotten shepherd boy alone on the hills and made him ready before he ever knew why, meet you in your valley today. God bless you.